So, you've just been hired to analyze McDonald's 2025 annual report, and it didn't take long before you stumbled on some seriously big numbers. A global, comparable sales increase of 5.7% in the fourth quarter alone. An operating margin of over 40%, which puts it ahead of Tesla, Apple, and Netflix. And a total revenue of $26.89 billion for the year in view. You pause for a few seconds, genuinely stunned by what you're seeing. But as you dig deeper, you discover something even more surprising. Around 80 to 90% of the company's operating income was generated not from selling French fries or Big Macs, but from royalties and rent. Wait a minute. Isn't McDonald's supposed to be the biggest restaurant brand in the world? Well, on paper it is. But in reality, it's one giant real estate empire powered by an efficient cash flow machine that never stops grinding. In today's video, we'll reveal the 3 key pillars of this well-oiled machine and explain how each one operates. But before then, let's talk about how this cash flow machine came about. The story of McDonald's cash flow machine really came into the spotlight around 2005 when Bill Ackman began quietly building a major stake in the company. As one of Wall Street's most relentless hedge fund managers, Ackman knew McDonald's inside and out. And after studying the numbers closely, he concluded that McDonald's was more of a real estate empire than a fast food chain. Furthermore, he argued that the company was wildly undervaluing its own assets. So he put forward a bold proposal with key action plans that he believed could unlock billions in hidden value. First, he urged McDonald's to sell 65% of its company-owned stores to private franchisees. Ackman believed that by doing this, the operational costs would reduce while profit margins increased. Secondly, he proposed that McDonald's use its vast land holdings as collateral to secure large-scale loans and use the funds to buy back some of the company's stock. Unfortunately, the board felt those ideas would pose serious strategic and financial risks to McDonald's core system. So, Ackman's proposal was shelved. But the fact that the debate played out in public put McDonald's under immense pressure to refine its operation. And that refinement led to the invention of the most efficient cash flow machine in the restaurant industry. You see, if you ask a random person on the street to explain the secret behind McDonald's incredible success, they'll list out generic factors like innovation, consistency, speed, and efficiency. Honestly, those are all valid answers, but the one thing that 99% of responders won't mention is constant, guaranteed cash flow. And in today's world, that's the single most valuable thing any business can have. To understand how McDonald's generates that cash flow, we need to talk about its most important customers. And I'm not talking about people like you and me popping in for a Big Mac when we're hungry. I'm talking about franchisees, the men and women who toil day and night to keep our favorite McDonald's store open. These people are official representatives of the McDonald's brand, responsible for upholding the company's elevated standards at every location they operate. And because the company's reputation depends on their performance, McDonald's ensures they're handpicked based on a set of strict, non-negotiable criteria. And as you can imagine, money is at the very top of the list. To become a McDonald's franchise owner, you must have at least $750,000 in non-borrowed personal funds. In addition, you are expected to pay a one-time licensing fee of $45,000 and also deposit a minimum of $100,000 as working capital for each restaurant you own. But the requirements don't end there. Prospective franchisees must also complete a rigorous training program at the famous Hamburger University in Chicago. And perhaps, most critically, they must commit to running their McDonald's location full-time. No side businesses, no divided attention. Now, that explains why only 1 out of every 100 applicants ever makes the cut. But come to think of it, what do these franchisees actually get in return for all that investment and sacrifice? Well, according to industry data, the average McDonald's restaurant in the United States generates between $2 million and $4 million in annual sales. But after subtracting operating costs, the actual take-home profit lands somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 per year. So, what exactly is included in the cost of operation that makes it so expensive? You see, franchise owners cover all costs tied to supplies, labor, utilities, equipment, and maintenance. They also contribute 4% of gross revenue to McDonald's National Marketing Fund, plus an additional 4 to 5% as a service royalty. Now, here's the part that you probably haven't heard about. Both of those payments are charged against gross sales, not profit. So whether a franchisee is thriving or barely keeping the lights on, McDonald's always gets paid first. For instance, if a store generates $2 million in annual sales, McDonald's collects at least $80,000 in royalties before the franchisee sees a single dollar of profit. And ultimately, that steady, guaranteed income, collected from thousands of locations all over the world, is the first pillar of McDonald's cash flow machine. But while royalty is a solid source of income, it's probably not as stable or predictable as rent, which is the second pillar of this cash flow machine. Today, McDonald's is the 5th largest landlord in the world with a real estate portfolio valued at $120 billion. But those properties aren't leased out randomly. Instead, they are designed or repurposed to house around 80% of the company's 45,000 outlets. Now, here's the trick behind how that arrangement works. You see, every franchisee operating on McDonald's-owned property pays the company rent every month. That fee typically falls between 11 and 19% of the store's monthly gross sales, and in many cases, the total amount paid over time far exceeds the original market value of the property itself. So, going by our earlier example, if a store generates $2 million in a year, the franchisee could pay anywhere from $220,000 to $380,000 in rent alone. Multiply that across tens of thousands of locations on every continent, and you begin to understand how powerful the second pillar is. But guess what? The third pillar is just as important. Most people today treat debt like it's the enemy, something to be feared, minimized, and paid off as fast as humanly possible. But for McDonald's, it's a lethal financial tool and one of the key drivers behind its cash flow machine. As of December 2025, McDonald's owes over $54 billion. Now, that's a number that would send most boards of directors into a panic, but definitely not those at McDonald's. That's because the company's BBB+ credit rating allows it to borrow money at some of the lowest interest rates available to any corporation. In addition, McDonald's operating income is roughly 7 times higher than its annual interest expense, so the debt never puts a strain on the business. Also, it generated over $9 billion in operating cash flow in its most recent fiscal year, more than enough to cover both interest payments and principal repayments without breaking a sweat. Lastly, the loans that McDonald's collects aren't just invested blindly. They are deployed strategically into several schemes that yield high, guaranteed returns. Surprisingly, one of those schemes is stock buybacks. Yes, the very strategy Bill Ackman proposed and the board blatantly rejected many years ago. But now they're executing it on a scale that even Ackman didn't anticipate. By purchasing its own shares on the open market, McDonald's reduces the total number of shares in circulation, and as a result, the company's earnings per share is automatically inflated, meaning that its top management and shareholders are paid higher dividends without necessarily growing the business. According to Forbes, McDonald's has returned approximately $79 billion to shareholders through dividends and buybacks over the past 2 decades. That's an exceptional figure that speaks for itself. However, not everyone is on board with the stock buyback strategy. Some analysts say it is not sustainable in the long run because it's financed largely by debt. But so far, the company's growth metrics are doing just fine. Between 2008 and 2024, the number of McDonald's stores across the world increased by roughly 36%. Also, the company's revenue and profit margins have climbed steadily year after year, and its stock price, which sat near $33 per share during the early 2000s, has since surged past $300. Beyond massive revenue, efficient operating margin, and soaring stock price, we must also appreciate the impact that McDonald's cash flow machine has on our lives. Currently, McDonald's restaurants serve more than 68 million customers every single day. That's roughly 1% of the world's entire population. At the same time, the company is also one of the largest private employers in the world, with 2 million people on its global payroll. In fact, it is said that 1 out of every 8 Americans has worked at a McDonald's store at some point in their life. So, yeah, regardless of what you think about this cash flow machine, it works, and chances are it has directly touched the life of someone you know. All right, now you've seen how McDonald's prints money from fast food and real estate. So, it's probably a good time to tell you about another company with a far bigger cash flow machine that profits from almost everything you do. Yes, you heard that right. Every time you eat, drive, shop, and transact, this little-known company gets a little kickback. And yet, the traditional media barely mentions it. So, we've made an entire video about this said company to unmask its true identity and explain its deep influence on the global economy. Be sure to check it out, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to enjoy more exciting content like this.